we're starting Fear the Walking Dead. As The Walking Dead started in Atlanta, Fear the Walking Dead starts as California as our main character, Nick. We see he's not doing too well as the place he's staying looks like he's definitely been doing drugs. He ends up walking around and calls out for his girl best friend, wondering where she's at. But as soon as he finds her, she's a flesh-eating walker. But as soon as he stops in the road, he ends up getting ran over. What a start to Fear the Walking Dead. And don't forget the title card. And now we see Nick's mom, Madison, as she's trying to tell Alicia to get ready for school, while her husband, Travis, ended up fixing the sink. What a dynamic duo. But of course that's gotta end as soon as they get a call from the hospital saying that Nick's there. And we see straight off the rip that Madison doesn't care what the cops question Nick about and that he's not going to jail, which is actually super funny. As Madison and Travis are having a deep conversation, Travis has to go off and answer a phone call, which is actually his first wife named Ibiza and his son. So basically his son was supposed to come stay with him this weekend but doesn't want to, but has to anyways. But as soon as Travis gets back in and talks to Madison, Madison says she has to go to work. So Travis tells her to go to work and stays with Nick. Madison ends up getting Alicia to her high school, in which she actually works there too. But as some kids come through, the metal detector ends up going off on one of these kids, where we can definitely tell that Madison knows there's something in his pockets but says there isn't and tells her that she's going to take him to her room. Madison ends up making him take out what he had, which was a knife. She ends up asking him why he's acting like this, and he says because of the news on how everyone's getting really sick, and it's not just being sick. He says something's gonna change. And even though Alicia's got a good school and a good mom to teach, she still wants to skip class to see her boyfriend. Nick ends up having a conversation with Travis saying he's been on drugs many times, but he's never seen a zombie while he was on it. So Travis ends up asking him where he was at, and Nick ends up telling him it's just one church. So Travis ends up getting investigating. He ends up looking everywhere, but all he finds is a bunch of blood. And you already know that blood's nasty. Anyways, now we're back at the hospital seeing that Alicia's got some food for Nick to eat. Travis ends up getting back to Madison and tells her that he went to the church and says that there was literally nothing there, but Madison just thinks that Nick was just high. And then Nick and Travis end up having a deep conversation on Nick wanting to stop doing drugs, while Alicia's actually trying to go to college and her boyfriend's just literally trying to stay there and do nothing with his life. Like, what type of guys are y'all into? Madison ends up walking into the principal's room where they act like it's gonna be a walker, but then they prank you. He ends up turning around just to see that Madison walks in. And it's honestly really funny because you never know when the zombie apocalypse is actually gonna start. Nick ends up asking one of these nurses if she can untie one of his hands so he can have the other hand a little bit loose. So of course, being a stupid nurse, she ends up doing it. And as soon as they're busy with the other patient seizing out, Nick ends up unplugging himself and getting up and running. And there's no telling if he's gonna go home. Travis and Madison keep asking the nurse where Nick ended up going, which she says that he got loose and they just need to call the cops. Travis ends up showing Madison the junkie place that they all go to do drugs, and that's where she ends up breaking down, seeing that this is where Nick lived. So Madison and Travis end up going to one of his best friends trying to look for him, which the dude doesn't even know where he's at. As he says, he only hopes that he's safe. But as we see that Nick's trying to wait for someone, Travis and Madison end up getting stuck on the road with a bunch of traffic. They end up seeing a bunch of cop cars, but still didn't know what happened. But for some reason, the principal ended up having the video where it shows a dead man hold his arm up into a man and takes a bunch of shots, which nobody's ever seen at this moment. But now we know the zombie apocalypse is on its way. The kids pile on the bus to make their way home as Madison sees that one kid that wandered for the last time. Of course, we come back to Nick seeing that he was on the phone with the dude, which basically means he lied to his mom. Nick sits down and tells him that he's seen a bunch of stuff on these drugs that he gave him and asks him if he laced them. He ends up saying that he'd never lace anything that's stupid to think of. While Nick's trying to leave, he ends up making him stop. He holds on and hugs Nick as he tells him he's going to take him somewhere safe. to go get in his car as he takes him down the most suspicious alley ever, and he's about to let Nick out of his car till Nick realizes he's going to try to shoot him. So Nick acts like he doesn't know and goes straight for the gun, but it ends up backfiring and shooting his friend straight in the stomach. He asks if he's okay as he goes and smokes a stogie, while Travis and Madison finally get to his location. He asks where he's been, and that's where Nick tells him that he ended up shooting his best friend and he ended up randomly disappearing. But as soon as Nick shows him where the alley was that they left him, he's disappeared. They tell Nick that it's just the drugs that's making him act crazy, but while Travis is reversing the car, they end up seeing somebody walking, and it's Nick's friend. Madison tries to talk to him, but Nick ends up running him over because he doesn't trust him. But he ends up getting back up as the second time Nick ends up running him over. And we see that the world hasn't started on the apocalypse yet, but it's definitely getting there. And we're back with episode 2. As we start as the principal as he's checking the hallways to make sure every student made their way home, while Alicia's trying to figure out where her boyfriend's been because he's went incognito for 2 days. So of course she makes it to his house and tries to figure out what's going on. Ends up seeing that his door is open and he's definitely not doing too well. And we're right back with Travis, Madison, and Nick as they're trying to get Alicia's attention. Nick tries to change the channel and ends up hearing nothing talk about walkers. Madison ends up calling Alicia, asking where she's at, and she ends up telling her that she's at her boyfriend's and she needs to come here quick. While Travis's actual kid named Chris is actually on the bus on the way from school, which he gets a call from Travis, but of course he doesn't answer. Madison gets over to Alicia as she's seeing she's taking care of her boyfriend and tells her to get away from him. Travis asks if he can talk to him for a minute. So while Alicia walks out for 2 seconds, he ends up seeing that he got bit. And that's where they kind of put it together that this is how it all starts. Madison says they have to leave, but Alicia doesn't want to as she tells her boyfriend that she loves him. But he tells her that he loves her too, but tells her he wants her to go. And while Chris was still on the bus, ambulances and cops start showing up one by one. Some dude ends up walking on the bus telling them that a cop shot a dude 11 times for no reason. While Madison ends up thanking Nick because he basically saved their lives. But Travis is still worried about his son and Eliza, so he's going to find them. Travis tries to call her to make sure everything's okay, which she just acts like a complete douchebag the whole entire time. So is Chris. Anyways, Travis says he's on his way. Chris keeps following all the people as he's seen a cop got bit. Well, they don't know what's going on yet. So Madison's trying to pick up Nick's medication, but they won't let her as they're not answering. But that gives her an idea because if there's no people answering, there's probably no one there. And as Travis is trying to make it to Eliza's, he sees as a cop start to stock up with water. For some odd reason, instead of going to a hospital, Madison ends up going to her school, where she does end up finding Nick medication, but also ends up finding out that her friend's still alive. As we see that Alicia doesn't really care too much for her brother as she just leaves him, but she ends up coming back around as he almost dies on his own puke. He makes it to Eliza's house where all she wants to do is sit and argue, but he's more worried about the actual important things. Chris ends up getting a call and actually answering it, thinking that it's his mom, but it ends up being Travis. He ends up asking him where he's at, and he says that he's in a riot and he wants to stay in it, while Madison helps the boy get as much food as he can. But as soon as they're about to leave, they end up hearing a walker on the walkie, so he's not far. So they get the food and they try to run out of the school as fast as possible. But of course, right at the front doors, they end up seeing a walker walk around. As it was the principal, he ended up dying, but Madison thinks that he's still alive and says that he's sick and tries to help him. While my boy's actually smart, he knows that these aren't sick people, but he knows they are zombies. The zombified principal ends up falling down with the kid as he's on top of him. Madison gets a fire extinguisher and ends up beating his head in. Chris sits and thinks he's hard as he's videoing all this stuff going down, while Travis and Eliza definitely figured out which riot he's in. We see that a cop tries to tell a woman to stop, but she ends up getting close and they shoot her. But to everyone else in the world, they just think that the police is being corrupted. But Travis, Eliza, and Chris can't stay on the roads, So they end up seeing a barber as he's closing off his store with a metal guarding, and they ask if they can stay with him. The man says that they can thank his wife and his daughter Ophelia. Madison ends up taking the kid back home as he asks if he wants to stay, but he says he'll be fine and she just needs to worry about Nick. Which is really sad because I'd love if this kid would have came back into the story somewhere. We see it's starting to get darker, but things aren't getting any better. Madison finally gets home with Nick's medicine as she breaks down because she had to kill the principal and has his blood on it. But as Madison's breaking down, she gets a call from Travis saying that they will be fine and they'll be there the next day. They just end up getting stuck in a barbershop. Alicia looks over at the road as she sees that her neighbors are killing each other now, which Madison just tries to keep her away from. Travis and the others end up sitting there as the woman ends up praying for everyone. So hopefully her team will make it back safe. And we're back with episode 3, seeing that nothing's calmed down at night. You see that Alicia keeps asking Madison what's going on, as Alicia still doesn't know about the walkers. But of course her and Nick do, which she gives Nick his medicine, which they don't have a lot of, but she doesn't tell him about. Everyone's just chilling back at the barbershop until they start feeling that the walls are getting hot because they're burning the place down. With no other choice, they try to make their way through the rot and walkers. While Alicia, Nick, and Madison are sitting playing Monopoly, we see that Travis and the others aren't really running into anyone unsafe until a sign ends up falling off on Daniel's wife. Travis and Chris end up helping her get out and into the truck. And as they're on their way to the hospital, they see that California is fully losing its power. So this is not good. And now that Madison and the others are in the dark, they end up putting the game up. As Nick ends up hearing a sound, he goes to check it, which just ends up being a dog. But since their neighbor's house still has power for some unknown reason, they're going to check around for resources. As they're looking around, Alicia ends up seeing a man walk into their house. So Nick and Madison hurry to get the shotgun reloaded. But as they were about to wait, they end up seeing that Travis is back. Travis and the others end up going inside to find no one but a walker eating on a dead body. Since Madison, Alicia, and Nick are on the other side, they end up jumping the fence but forgot the ammo, so Alicia goes back. She ends up grabbing all of the ammo, but as we see Madison won't shoot him, Daniel ends up doing it himself. And as he ends up coming back, that's when we actually know that he's a walker. But while Travis's kid Chris was trying to save Alicia, she ended up actually breaking his nose almost. Which I really don't understand, like, why are these two families so dysfunctional? Anyways, Daniel ends up saying that his family will come for them the next day. So Travis says they can stay another night, even though Madison wants to leave now. Daniel tries to warn Travis about the walkers, but Travis just thinks they're sick. While Daniel's lying to his wife saying they're safe because they really don't have a ride to go anywhere. And Travis ends up telling Madison they can stay one more night and they'll all be safe together anyways. So next morning hits and they end up seeing the neighbor dead, but Travis just acts like she's a sick woman. Stupid. While Daniel, not being stupid, is actually showing Chris how to use a weapon. Which, of course, Travis shuts down really quick. Madison ends up saying that she's a walker and they do need to take her out, but Travis keeps saying that she's actually just a live person sick. But now it's time. Her team is ready to get to the desert as they're about to leave Daniel, his wife, and Ophelia, which Madison and them actually helped with, giving them half the medicine that Nick had. As both cars are about to drive away, but as Madison's about to leave, the woman that was dead's husband's about to walk back in and see her, but Madison tries to get there first. He ends up going to hug her as the military end up gunning her down and saving and making sure the others survived. And we see that the army's here to stay, making sure that everyone's okay, asking all the residents' names, while Nick tries to be a crackhead and tries to break into his door to get the medicine. As the military leave a sign probably that they cleared the place or it's safe, we cut back over to Daniel. As we see, he's definitely hiding something. And we're back with episode 4, seeing that Nick's just loving life as he swims in a nice pool. Bet it feels way better than drugs. As Chris was watching the army go back and forth, he ends up documenting as it's day 9 as the walls finally went up and the powers went down. He says that the army's their saviors and that he's glad to have them around. But as Chris keeps documenting his life, he ends up seeing a flashing light that looks like Morse code. Back at the house, it looks like the army finally got the power back on, and it looks like the military wants them to attend for an announcement they're going to tell everyone. Chris goes to tell his dad about the light, but of course he just thinks it's some piece of metal flashing in the light. Madison tries to give Nick a pill, but apparently Nick doesn't want to do drugs anymore. Seems like he's finally done. The military end up routing everybody together and tell them that they have rations for everyone by day, but they're still getting all of the doctors that they need, and that there's 12 more other places optional. Basically says everyone needs to listen to him or they will die. While apparently the leader wants to talk to Travis. As they get to walking, the dude explains that there's a man that keeps acting crazy and won't let him take their fever, so he's endangering everyone. At first, Travis says he doesn't really know the guy, but they say if he doesn't help, then they will just kill him. So Travis comes in to her wife and asks where he's at, and finds him as Travis tries to give him advice and tells him that he needs to take the fever test so he can make sure his family's okay. And it looks like Alicia's bringing all the rations that the military gave her, as Madison and Chris are working together, which Alicia apparently doesn't like for some reason. But she just goes back to her room as she reads the note that her boyfriend left her and just breaks down. It looks like Eliza, Travis's other wife, is being the doctor to everyone else, while Nick looks like he's being really suspicious. Come on, Nick, don't do it. But of course, as soon as we go to the patient that she was serving with the medicine, the camera angles us down to see a junkie's always gonna be a junkie. Looks like Daniel's daughter Ophelia is trying to get real close to one of the military men, but it's not because she's a hoe, it's just because she wants to get the medicine for her mom so she can survive. But apparently everyone's getting nasty as we see Madison and Travis are having some fun. Of course, right after they end up getting into a little fight about who's the real good parent. Madison asks him if he actually seen the light that Chris was talking about, and Travis says yes, but he don't believe it. Mr. Madison end up hearing the husband's wife end up calling for them because he ran away in his car. So while the next day starts, Madison's trying to Morse code the person with the flashlight, while it seems Travis is getting a little closer to the dude. Apparently later that day he ends up asking the military man where he's at, and he says that they did find him, but they just put him somewhere. And yes, these military dudes are literally douchebags. Eliza ends up going into the room to see the old man, but ends up looking like he died. This military woman ends up coming in to talk to Eliza and asks her the real question if she's actually a nurse or not, which she isn't. But she knows that that old man shouldn't have died. At some point, Madison ends up actually getting past the gates and runs away to see what's going on, where she ends up finding piles and piles and piles of missing people, and even more dead bodies everywhere. But as Madison ends up seeing something really weird, she ends up seeing the army as she has to hide. Cause if they find her out, they will shoot her on sight. The military woman says that they're gonna have to take her to a different place, so Daniel says that he's gonna go with them, while she says of course he's going to. But the other nurse ends up taking all Nick's stuff, and it looks like his blood pressure is rising a little too high, which he tries to joke off, while Alicia's just poking herself being suicidal. Madison gets back and tells Daniel what she's seen, as she's seen bodies of people that were infected and people that died that weren't infected. And that's where Daniel explains a story to her that his dad told him. A bunch of soldiers ended up going to Daniel's dad's immigration camp, and as the days went by, they said that they would move other people to different camps, but in reality they just took them and killed them, which basically means that Daniel's explaining that that might happen right now. So he says when he goes with his wife, if they don't come back, just to watch out for his daughter Ophelia. Nick, literally being the worst person ever, is looking for drugs in the dead person's house that he killed, when his mom comes in and knows exactly what he's doing. And when she figures out that he was the one that actually killed that man, she starts beating the living crap out of him. Like, dang, she just rammed his head into the wall. But when everybody gets back to the house, apparently the military shows up, And as they're about to take Daniel's wife, they say that they're not taking Daniel with them, but that they're here for Nick as his blood pressure was high. They knock him out, make sure everyone stays back, and takes him away. And as that's all happening to them, Elise is literally helping the military. So the rest of the military men make sure they can't move. As Madison sees her son get taken away, she comes back pissed and tells Travis that this is Elise's fault. Yeah, Travis, I guess you're right that you can't kind of live with both wives. But as he sits and tries to take a breather, Alicia's voice overlays as she's reading her suicide note while Travis actually sees the light, and there's no way that that was a piece of metal. And we're back with episode 5, seeing that the hospital actually is real. This man named Strands actually having a decent conversation with the man that ended up having to leave the other team. And as they're talking, we can just tell that Strand's not really too good of a guy. They end up checking his fever and ends up being too high, so they end up having to take him out. But it looks like Strand has somebody else to talk to, and it seems like this person's gonna be a little bit more important. Cut back to Ophelia as she's throwing bottles at the military, going crazy. The dudes was actually about to execute her. Her boyfriend tries to stop him as he wants to kill her anyways. Like, what? These people are brutal. Says they have rules, but the boyfriend says that he'll talk her down. As Madison and Travis end up drinking some coffee, Travis says that he's got to go on another run with the army. While Chris isn't doing too well as he's seen his mom leave right in front of his eyes with no hesitation. But it seems like Elise is doing pretty well. She's helping people at the hospital. She tries to ask around questions where Nick or the other woman's mom is, but they don't tell her yet. Madison ends up hearing weird sounds downstairs as she grabs a knife and goes to check out the sound. She makes it to the room, seeing one of the soldiers tied up as Daniel says he's about to get some answers out of him. And it seems like Mass is down to get a little dirty for some answers. Telling Travis that they're gonna go check out that place they seen the flash of light from, but they're gonna have to see if he can kill a walker or not. While Daniel talks about his dad used to get interrogated, it looks like he's gonna be doing some interrogation himself. They end up keeping the sniper steady on a walker, so they make Travis have to go shoot the walker, but he can't because he still thinks it's a person. Travis and the other military men finally get to the place as they all rush in and tell Travis to sit tight. With the sounds that Travis is hearing off the radio, it doesn't sound like it's anything good. Ends up starting to abuse the dude as he starts giving them answers saying that it was Operation Cobalt, so now they just gotta figure out what that is. But as everyone's busy, it seems like Alicia isn't. So it looks like her and Chris are gonna go on an adventure. As they look through the rich people's wardrobes, they end up finding a bunch of dresses. While back at the hospital, they ended up taking Nick's blood pressure and it ended up being way too high. As they're about to take Nick, Strand ends up giving up some more jewelry to make sure he stays. So it seems like the cops are still corrupt. Watches as only 3 soldiers end up coming out. Travis asks where the leader went as they tell him to get in the truck and they gotta leave now. Eliza finally ends up finding Ophelia as they had to cut her leg off, but she also figures out that they kinda took her off all of her medicine. Alicia and Chris end up dressing up while they end up pulling the zombie land and trashing the place because they just feel like it. Like, come on, you know you've always wanted to do this one day. Travis ends up finally getting back, asking what happened, and Madison tells him to tell Travis what Cobalt is. Cobalt is an operation where the military are gonna leave, and they're basically just gonna go their own way. Even worse, they're gonna kill off all of the people. Soldier says they only have time to live until next morning. Strand takes a breather in as he says it's nice not to smell pee as he gets to smell Nick's throw up instead. Nick keeps asking why he saved him, in which Strand says he didn't save him but did him a favor for right now. And Strand ends up answering Nick as he says he's going to be part of his next move, and Nick says what's the next move? And it definitely looks like it's going to be a big one. They try to put Ophelia back on oxygen, but her heart ends up giving out. So they have to kill Daniel's wife off. But as we see the armies going back home, it looks like Daniel's trying to see something for himself. By that, I mean Daniel might have just found the hospital. Question is, how does he get in? And we're back with the season finale. I was actually wrong. The doors that Daniel was at were actually a horde of walkers in a big building. And now we're back at the base that Madison and all the others are at. As it's about to be morning time, everyone packs their stuff, getting ready to leave. Travis and Madison tunes everyone in, saying that they need to get out of here now. So without a hesitation, everyone packs up and gets ready to get on the road. Madison kind of feels bad for the people that are staying back because they don't know what they're in for. Eliza asks if she can see her son, but the person says if her son didn't make it, then he's not going to be here. Because apparently the only people that matter are the people that are here. Travis talks to the other military man, saying that since he helped that he can go with them, but he just wants to stay back. So Daniel goes and opens the gate as all of her team gets out before they end up striking the base. And of course they ended up moving their base to the hospital, but Daniel ends up coming out as the army ended up locking and loading. But it doesn't seem like it's gonna matter because Daniel bring a lot of walkers. And I mean a lot of walkers. The team end up meeting up in the garage to the hospital as they say that Alicia and Chris are gonna stay in the car as everyone else finds everybody. While Strand's paying attention to everybody freaking out as he knows it's about time for them to leave. He tells Nick to make sure not to draw too much attention. While Alicia and Chris end up talking though, they end up hearing some military men, so they hide back in the car. And Strand and Nick ended up getting their chances. They have to leave everyone behind. But Alicia and Chris end up getting caught as they try to sexually assault Alicia. Disgusting. So Chris ends up hitting them and he ends up knocking Chris out. There's so many walkers out in the distance that the army cannot hold them back. Strand and Nick try to make their way through, while the rude soldier that took all his stuff ended up dying. He got his diamonds back. And Travis end up finding all these people locked up, so they end up telling her where Nick is as he lets them all out. But unfortunately for Nick and Strand, they end up getting stuck behind a door and a horde of walkers behind them. Oh, that's not good. Eliza ends up coming to a near-death experience with a walker, but Ophelia ends up saving her just in time. Madison almost gets bit too, but Nick saves her just in time. Daniel and Ophelia want to find his wife, but that's when Eliza tells them that she's dead. And that's when we come back to the room and see that no more of the patients are there because the military burned all of them to a crisp. So they make it back to the car and see that Chris and Alicia aren't there. But it seems like the soldiers just wanted the car so they could leave. But one of the douchebags ended up staying behind. And as he has his gun on Daniel, he switches and shoots Ophelia. So Travis pounces on him and beats him to a pulp. Like, look at that man's face. See what California looks like now as everyone's back on the road. Strand tells the team that they need to make one next stop. So they go to this really nice house as he tells everyone to get comfortable. And Eliza keeps being super nice, for some reason telling Daniel how to take care of her instead of, being there to help her. And then after that, she ends up hugging Chris very weirdly. But I'm not the only one seeing this, as Madison is. And Travis sees as Madison follows Eliza down to the water. While Nick asks what Strand's looking for as he's looking for Abigail. Nick's obviously like, are you crazy or something? And that's where Strand pulls out the telescope and tells Nick to look in it. And now we see why Abigail's so important. Madison ends up asking Eliza what's going on, and we see that she got bit. Travis ends up seeing Madison with the gun, so she ends up explaining what's going on. So Travis ends up breaking down as he's gonna have to be the one to shoot her. So while Alicia and the others are just chilling, they end up hearing the gunshot go off. Everyone goes running for the sound, as we see how broken Travis is now without Eliza. But at least he's not by himself, as he has Madison by his side. And as we cut away from our new crew, it looks like next season we're gonna be traveling water.